Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I'm here today at Morphy's taking a look at a Webley new model Army Express No. 5 revolver. And I think the best way to describe this in a nutshell is that it is the best of both the American and the European schools of revolver design for its period. This was introduced in 1878, so exactly the same year as Colt introduced their double-action 1878 revolvers. And when this came out, Webley was hoping to get military contracts with it, which they ultimately never did, which is kind of a shame because I think it's a pretty darn good gun. Now, when I say the best of both the American and European schools of revolver design, the difference here, and this is all generic, there are exceptions to these things, but in general, the United States didn't do that fancy double action stuff until relatively late, but had powerful pistol cartridges. We wanted horse-killing, man-stopping revolver cartridges. The Europeans tended towards much less powerful cartridges, but they had higher technology in the revolvers. They had double-action guns much earlier and were very comfortable with the double-action system. What Webley did here with their No. 5 was to combine that. They wanted a powerful cartridge. This will chamber the American .45 Colt, but they also wanted double action, and they wanted it in a stout, durable, rugged, military-style pistol. And I think they did a pretty darn good job putting it together. Now, if we set the stage here, Webley has obviously been making guns for a long time in Britain, and they had a series of numbered patterns at this point. And there are two that are relevant to this story, the No. 4 and the No. 5. The No. 4 was also called the Webley Price. It's a top break design, so it pops open, ejects all 6 cases simultaneously, quick to reload, but potentially fragile. You have a strap that has to hold together, and if you have a powerful cartridge, that can come loose over time, sometimes fairly quickly, cause accuracy problems, cause reliability problems, ultimately potentially causing safety problems. Now, the Webley top break design would end up being adopted by the British, but not until 1887, and that would be the Webley Mark I. In the meantime, Webley also has their No. 5 model, which is a solid frame gun, and in its Royal Irish Constabulary pattern, the No. 5 RIC, Webley has made a very successful product out of this little guy. They've sold them to a lot of different police agencies. It's chambered for the British Service 450 Adams cartridge. It's a 5.6 shot. They make it in a variety of sizes, barrel lengths, kind of you name it, double action, great police pistol. Not quite robust enough for a military pistol. Remember that this is a military pistol in the days when any potential repair, resupply, help is going to be weeks away by sailing ship. This is when the British are taking expeditions into India and Africa, South Africa, for example. What are you going to do if your RIC No. 5 breaks apart on the veldt in South Africa? You're kind of screwed. You want something that's more durable. Now, this came out in 1878. Obviously, as I said, Webley was hoping to get military contracts with it. What the British ended up actually adopting was the Enfield Mark I. This thing, which is a really sort of kludgy, bad idea of a revolver. It's a design by committee. It sounds really cool. It's got specialized extraction so that when you pop the thing open, it'll eject empty cases, but it'll leave live rounds loaded so that you can top it off if it's partially fired. But it didn't really work that well. It's too heavy. It's not a great revolver. Now, the British military issued revolvers to some of its troops, some specialty troops and non-commissioned officers, but officers were required to supply their own sidearms, and the only real requirement was they had to use the standard service ammunition. So the Webley Army Express here becomes pretty popular for about 10 years with officers who took one look at this thing and they're like, yeah, just no, we're not getting that. We want something good. They turned to the Webley Army Express. So let's take a closer look at it. Let me show you the cool elements that went into this. All right, the new model Army Express. There was an old model, by the way. We'll get to that in a moment. We have a 5.5-inch barrel. We have what's called a saw handle grip. It's not quite a bird's head grip, but it is a definite departure from the old style of flat-based grip that you would find on the Webley No. 5 RICs. And it is, frankly, a very comfortable grip. It's a double action lockwork. It is, in fact, the same lockwork that has just been carried over again from the RIC pattern, so it does not have a rebounding hammer. When you fire this, the hammer just stays down. That means the firing pin is protruding in there. You do not want to carry this hammer down on a loaded cartridge, a live cartridge. In theory, you could put it back to its safety notch right there, which is safe unless maybe you drop the gun and it falls on that hammer and slips over the safety notch and fires. That's bad. Also allows the cylinder to free spin while it's in that position. More technologically advanced lockwork systems would do things like lock out the fire control when the gate was opened. This one does not. You can still cock and fire this with the gate open. So it's a pretty simple lockwork. The idea here was to make this robust. Now let's take a look at the No. 5 RIC in light of considering it as a military pistol. And the problems we have here, first off, it's nice that it's small, but it's only chambered for the 450 Adams, the Mark I cartridge, which is a fairly weak cartridge. We do have this gate loading system, and the ejector is this rod that you have to pull. It sits in the center of the axis there. You have to pull it out, rotate it up, and then you're like, it's flimsy. You can see that this thing is flimsy. It's finicky. It's slow. It's not a great ejection system. Webley looked at what Colt was doing and went, wow, that is a whole lot better. And so they just straight up copied Colt's ejector rod, which it appears Colt didn't patent. I'm not sure exactly what the deal is there, but Colt never sued Webley over the use of the ejector rod here. So it's fixed in place. All you have to do is open the gate, line up your chamber, hit the ejector rod. It's spring-loaded, so it returns on its own. Much better ejection system, much more suited to a military revolver. If you're going to have a single, gate loading, manually operated gun like this, you at least want to make it quick and easy to reload, and this does. Now, that does mean that this central arbor support system, the axis of the cylinder, has to change a bit because you can't just keep using this if you're changing the ejector rod. So what Webley does is replace it with a center axis rod here, a cylinder arbor that has a latch on it. Push that latch in and I can pull this right out. Then open the gate, cylinder falls out, gun's disassembled. That's all there is to it. The RIC has this single piece wraparound wood grip that looks pretty cool, but that's definitely going to be a bit fragile, and if it breaks, it's going to be a little more difficult to repair than what they went to on the new model Army Express, which is a solid frame here. You've got metal all the way around the grips and just two grip panels sitting on the outside. So that's a much more robust system. And just looking at the frames, you can see how much this has been beefed up. There's a lot more material in a lot of elements of the frame here. This is a robust gun. This is a light-duty police gun. And speaking of that, let's take a quick look at the markings. We have our Webley and Scott flying bullet logo here, and then this is marked 455 CF centerfire and 45 long. Now 455 CF was the standard British service cartridge at the time. You'll see it referred to as 455 Webley, also 450 Adams. There are the details of the development of the British service cartridge are a bit beyond the scope of this video, but Webley made sure that this would handle both the early pattern and, as it's marked over on the other side, Webley No. 5 476. This sounds like a totally different cartridge. It's actually essentially the same cartridge with a heeled bullet, which means the bullet diameter is measured a bit larger. But this will handle any of the British service cartridges. And then 45 long actually refers to 45 Colt. Webley didn't say 45 Colt because they didn't want to write their competitor's name right there on their own guns. But this cylinder is way longer than the old Adams caliber RIC cylinders, and it will take full power 45 Colt. Now remember, this is of course the black powder era. We're not talking about modern smokeless powder 45 Colt, but the original horse-stopping US cavalry loads, those will run just fine in this revolver. Something that wasn't possible, by the way, on the British service Enfield revolvers. Now, by the way, I did mention that there was a number 5 old model Army Express revolver. That was essentially the RIC frame that had this ejection system bodged onto it. Those were only available for a short time. They weren't super popular. This is the gun that really made the Army Express name. And Express in this case basically is just a generic marketing term for powerful. It has had a number of technical specific meanings over time that change. Sometimes it means large diameter, sometimes it means small diameter, but it always means more powerful, more potent, and that's why Webley chose it for this gun. This particular one is even more interesting because it's marked Army Navy CSL. That is the Army and Navy Cooperative Society Limited. It is a retailer that was set up in 1871 by a group of British Army and Navy servicemen intending to essentially do the co-op model, buy things in bulk that military service members needed and then be able to sell them at below retail prices, below regular retail prices, to their Army and Navy members. And they sold guns, among many other things, and a lot of officers would purchase their sidearms from the Army Navy CSL. And so this is one that was retail marked for that company. And I think that really highlights how this was a popular choice for officers who had the option of whatever they wanted to carry, as long as it used the Army cartridge. And they took a look at that Enfield kludge and decided, this was, for a brief period, about 10 years, a really good choice for those British officers. Worth pointing out, this disappears from the Army Navy CSL catalog in 1890, which makes sense. By that point, the Webley Mark I has succeeded the Enfield, and there are a lot of arguments to be made for the Webley Mark I over the No. 5 New Army Express. I keep mentioning that this didn't get British military adoption, but I should also point out that in some of the more frontierish parts of the world, these were purchased in relatively large number, including by official organizations. So the Transvaal government bought a bunch of these, the Orange Free State also bought some, and you do see them used by more than just British officers specifically. This particular example was one of the blued guns. That bluing is fairly worn away, but you can still see remnants of it. I think this is a cool level of finish that shows a lot of honest wear. You could also get these guns nickeled, and nickel was a pretty popular choice, especially for officers who were going overseas with the guns, because the nickel really was a more durable finish, especially in wet, humid environments. As cool as this revolver is, it would have a relatively short lifespan because it was eclipsed by a number of technological improvements that came around pretty quickly in the late 1800s. So of course the development of smokeless powder in the late 1880s is a big factor. And then the development of tip-out cylinders allows you to have rapid reloading and a solid frame at the same time, which is far superior to the gate loading system on older guns like this. So ultimately, the biggest thing for Webley was that in 1887, they do manage to get one of their revolvers adopted by the British military. It will be the Webley Mark I, and it's actually a top break revolver. Kind of surprisingly, but they beef it up to military spec, gets adopted. The old Enfield Mark Is and Mark Is are a thing of the past, and there's no longer really a need for Webley to be promoting a No. 5 pattern military gun when it's got its Webley price derivative, its top break gun, in military service now, and that would go through a whole bunch, well, 6 marks eventually, and see massive production and massive amounts of service, leaving the new model Army Express way in the background. So I think this is a really cool example. It's neat to see one that is Army CSL retail marked, as well as being marked for all 3 different cartridges that could be fired in it. If I were equipping myself with a revolver in the mid-1880s, this would be really high on my list. I think it's durable, it handles well, it's got all the good options for ammunition, and it just looks really good to me. Anyway, so big thanks to Morphees for giving me access to this one to show to you guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.